Why are these people still complaining about the top 1% of earners that not only do the most for the most people in this whole country, but also contribute the most to the government itself? Let's watch.
The question that we are asking today is a pretty simple question. Do we continue the trend that technology only benefits the people on top, or do we demand that these transformational changes benefit working people? This is not a radical idea.
We have a balance. This disrupts that balance. And we won't maintain the status of being the world's wealthiest nation if we kneecap the American economy with something which purports to be good for the American worker, but indeed will lead to offshoring of jobs seeking for a lower cost labor force.
Now, not everybody has a monopoly on the best and worst ideas. Probably 100% of his ideas are not completely invalid or without some kind of merit. Yes, of course, you want people always paying into the system. But when the top 1% of people, the people that have made the lives of everyday common folk easier and better by their great ideas and use their own money, time, effort, energy to risk it all to pursue their dream, and obviously capitalism is the best example of someone who comes up with a great idea and then markets that to people, the consumers, the end user, and because it's such a good idea, people buy in and make that person who took all the risk incredibly successful. Vis-a-vis Michael Dell, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos. I'm not going to even get into Bezos yet. Bezos is obviously the epitome of the 1%. Elon Musk also. But let's just get back to a second of going back to Bernie, because Bernie got cornered in the Capitol asking about these questions of creating a shorter work week. So basically the employer pays the same but gets less productivity out of their people. Let's watch.
Hi, Harris. Well, Republicans say that this idea that everybody gets a 3-day weekend every weekend would be a business killer. So we had some questions for Senator Bernie Sanders about how this would all work and how businesses could afford it. Here's how it went. Can I talk to you about the 32-hour work week? It seems like Fox Business. Yeah. It seems like Democrats want businesses to be taxed more, pay their workers.
Really? Is that what you think?
pay their workers.
Excuse me.
I didn't get to ask a question.
Okay, thank you.
Senator,
you want to hold it? Okay. We held a hearing on a 32-hour work week because what we have seen is that over the last 50 years, despite a huge increase in worker productivity, almost all of the new wealth has gone to the top 1%, while 60% of the people are living paycheck to paycheck. Many of our people are exhausted. We work the longest hours of any people in the industrialized world. I think it's time for a shortened work week.
Can I ask you a question about that?
All right, so let's push back on him a little bit. I'm not disagreeing with the fact that people have to work very hard in order to earn their living. I don't know how Bernie is justifying, substantiating, reconciling that people are working harder than ever. Well, people get themselves into credit card debt and they get behind on their bills because they're spending and they're living a life and they're trying to keep up with the Joneses with money that they don't have. And there's always this constant drumbeat against the 1%, as if it's easy for just anybody to get into the 1%. The 1% of people, if you just use Jeff Bezos, for example, we're going to use Jeff Bezos as our example. He is the epitome, the picture, if you will, of the 1%. Now, Jeff Bezos started Amazon out of his garage, if I'm not mistaken. But we should try to understand how Jeff Bezos came to become this mega billionaire and what he had to do. But the real question is, who is the 1%? Well, let's look at who the 1% is. Bring it up and let's look at it. Okay? So we're into the 1%. So this is what you need annually in order to join the 1%. Okay? It takes an annual income of 650 grand to cross the threshold into the 1%, according to Smart Asset. And based on data from the IRS and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median household income brings home $75,000 annually, and that's important to recognize that. Go ahead. The state with the highest 1%, Connecticut, close to us, and the people in the 1% are earning 950 grand per year if you're the top earner. Massachusetts and California, it's like 900 grand, 850 grand. And where are these people? These people are in like high finance, hedge funds, stockbrokers, lawyers, people like that. There's not a lot of people that are in these earnings demographics, so I don't know why we're going off on these people. Go ahead. So the high earners in these states, they're still paying in at 28%. They're still paying a high tax rate. And then, of course, then they got to pay into, the federal tax rate as well. Then there's other states where joining the 1% is much easier. They say Appalachia, Virginia, where the threshold's much, much lower, like 300 grand. Go ahead. And then isn't this amazing? D.C., where all the corruption exists, well, that's where the highest earners exist. Bernie, the 1%. They're making well over $1 million a year in D.C. What business is in D.C.? What industry is in D.C.? I'll allow you to venture a guess on that one. Let's go back.
That. It seems like Democrats want businesses to be taxed more,
Really? That's not my assumption.
pay their workers more, lower prices,
No,
and now pay people not to work.
You know what I would like to see?
How are businesses going to survive that? That's the question. How can businesses survive all of those proposals?
When Mr. Bezos pays an effective tax rate lower than the average worker, I think we have a real problem in our tax system.
Well, what happens for those small businesses when they need people to buy into the cause and to stick around extra and help me make this dream work? You're right. I mean, that's how this country was built. So Paul Morrow, former New York City detective and attorney, was on the couch with us on Outnumbered yesterday, and he asked 10 plus hours, 4 days a week.
Right.
That way you get the 40 hours, but people get a 3-day work week. What do you think?
I think that's great. That's an alternative. That's a model that I've seen used at different companies, and people like it. They like the flexibility post-COVID to be able to work differently. But the companies and the government can work with them in making arrangements that are better. Let me just make one comment about what he said about the wealthy and the Jeff Bezos and why they're not paying their taxes. The top 1% in this country pay 46% of the entire federal income tax bill. He needs to stop saying that.
And of course, listen, I'm all for not driving people into the ground by just hammering them with a high intensity work week. Listen, I don't care. I could care less. You want to do all the work we need to do in terms of productivity inside of 3 days and work your 40 hours or so in 10 to 12 hours a day? No problem. I work in 2 days. I work up to 30 hours. So I don't ask for forgiveness from people if I have several cars, a couple of homes, I have savings and cash money because I worked my tail off to get there. And I also spent many, many years doing without. So you can't get on people that have acquired through hard work, effort, and energy. And the great thing about this country is you don't have to work hard if you don't want. But do not complain to those of us that are willing to suffer and sacrifice and put in extra days and time to acquire the finer things in life. And they keep coming back to Jeff Bezos. And of course, there are, and I just read an article that it may be misleading that the top 1% of earners are paying 46% of the tab to the federal government. I just so happen to agree that that's the case. That these folks that are in the 1%, yes, I mean, they're getting a lot of their money in capital gains and such, realized from like stock and repurchasing of stock and whatnot. And then the gains that are calculated on those stock gains when they cash out these stocks. But the point of the matter is they're still paying taxes. The greater point is this. They keep using Jeff Bezos. I don't even know why he's a Democrat, if he is a Democrat. They slam him the worst. So let's make a little defense and argue in favor of Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos has, I guess it was 2023, 1.5 million people, employees, that work for Amazon around the world. Okay, so let's just say for the sake of argument, and of course this is not the case, I'm just using round numbers, because there are certainly people on Amazon that are making six-figure salaries and high six-figure salaries that are in management positions and such. But let's just say for the sake of argument, you have 1.5 million people making an average of $60,000 a year. I could even go to $75,000, which would be the annual median income. But let's just say 60 for the sake of argument. By my calculus, that was $1.9 billion in tax revenue to the federal government, if you assume that of the $60,000, these people are paying an effective tax rate of 18 to 20%. So that means that Jeff Bezos, who took time, effort, energy, had a great idea, used his own risk capital to build something that benefits all of us and makes all of our lives easier. And don't tell me you don't have an Amazon account or Amazon Prime and you don't have your toilet paper or your paper towels or your soy sauce delivered to you via Amazon, because I know you do. So he, for all these employees that he has, pays in those employees to the federal government just on their own federal tax rates and such, not to mention state income tax, $2 billion and more. So what great idea did you come up with that contributed to the local, state, and federal governments $2 billion in tax revenues? So if these guys don't pay taxes, I think they well enough earned it, because their great ideas are paying local, state, and federal taxes and supporting tax revenues to these states that burn through your money and run huge tax deficits that destroy the quality of life for everybody in the state. That is, of course, if you live in a state with spend deficit lunatics. I'm just saying.
Here's some.
So first, I'm listening to him about reducing the work week. Number one, you're going to erode the work ethic that this country was built on, Harris. How much less do you want people to work than 40 hours? But number two, the implications of that on corporations and small business, by paying people for an extra day of work where they are not producing, will put not only some businesses out of business altogether, but it'll create an environment where you're going to see more layoffs, because the companies, that's not a sustainable model, and the companies won't be able to afford it. So we're living in an era, he's talking about technology and AI, where people are worried about their jobs already. And you want to implement a policy like this for the people who will still be working? It's disastrous.
And so, in closing, I'm all in favor of the 4-day work week. But you don't get paid for 5 days, you get paid for 4. So if you want to work 4 days for our organization, no problem. We're only going to pay you for 4 days. If you want to work a 5-day salary, we'll do it in 4, if that's the case. But give me 5 days of productivity. But I hired for companies like Con Edison until they threw me out because they didn't like the tonality of what I was doing to these new hires, because I don't put up with the BS. These same people that want to work less and they want you to pay them more are the same people that show up 15, 20 minutes late, make excuses why they're late, are the first ones to complain, bitch, and moan about work conditions and how hard they have to work, and are the first ones to go to management and complain about all the things that they're entitled to. And I cut the heads off of those crazy snakes right in the beginning, before they got hired and onboarded and became the troublemakers of tomorrow in the organization. Because I know about hiring people. You incentivize people to do less, don't be surprised when they do less. If you incentivize and you create an upward trajectory and path to doing more and getting more and achieving more and being paid more, well, then we're going to separate the winners from the losers. But don't ask Bernie about that, because Bernie didn't create a single job in all of his entire life. The exception of his porn days. Look it up.